mix of wonder and beauty. They provide us with fresh water, clean air, food, medicine, and products we depend on every day, and are home to millions of people and species. Sadly, the world's forests are disappearing rapidly due to things such as unsustainable agricultural expansion, illegal logging and mining, unsustainable forest management, climate change, and many other factors. But companies like Sylvamo are taking a stand with WWF to protect and restore forests in a key region where it operates, Brazil's Atlantic forest. The Atlantic forest is a richly biodiverse ecosystem that spans Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay. Unfortunately, this magnificent biome is highly endangered due to deforestation and forest degradation. Today, roughly 12% of the original forest remains in Brazil. WWF and Sylvamo are building on a project to help restore a portion of the Mogi Guaçu River Basin in the Brazilian Atlantic forest. The partnership entails targeting the highest priority parcels to restore in collaboration with local restoration organizations Copaiba and Grupo Dispersores, researchers and practitioners at the Federal Institute of the South of Minas Gerais, and a network of private landowners. WWF and Sylvamo are also growing a coalition of local stakeholders to implement a shared vision for restoration of the landscape. By doing so, they are strengthening conditions to scale up restoration in this vital region. Between 2019 and 2025, the project placed more than 375 hectares under restoration across 102 different properties, planting nearly 380,000 seedlings and protecting more than 160 springs. The strategic selection of land parcels has meant that the 375 hectares under restoration are connecting close to 1,200 hectares of forest. In 2022, WWF and Sylvamo expanded their partnership to bring a total area of 480 hectares of forest under restoration by 2026, with funding from Sylvamo and other donors. Healthy watersheds are at the core of healthy ecosystems. By focusing on forest restoration around natural springs, this project is helping to ensure that the Mogi Guaçu watershed is thriving for local communities who rely on fresh water to support their families and their livelihoods. Partnerships like this show how successful conservation initiatives can be when environmental organizations, companies, governments, and local communities work collectively. Together, WWF and Sylvamo are helping protect and restore this critical ecosystem to ensure a future where people and nature thrive.
Eu vejo muitas pessoas falando assim, que besteira plantar árvore, dá uma tristeza.
There is an urgency to protect what is left. There is an urgency to plant more, to restore more forests. The climate needs it, the world needs it.
Quando eu estudava na escola aqui vizinha, eu passava aqui em frente à régua, olhava, nossa, que lugar bacana, tenho vontade de entrar aqui. E até um dia a escola me chamou para poder fazer uma visita. Eu lembro perfeitamente, quando eu comecei a plantar ali a primeira árvore da minha vida, eu estou contribuindo com uma árvore, e em volta tinha várias. Quando eu crescer, eu quero trabalhar com isso.
Why do we restore land? We're addressing three major problems: loss of habitat, the extinction of species, lack of water, water security, and a runaway climate.
Quando eu vou na mata, eu acho uma matriz com muita semente. Faço a inscrição dela, aonde que ela está, e quando chegar outro ano, verifico se ela está com semente. Se ela tiver, eu vou coletar.
Science becomes an art because you realize that nature has its own tempo, its own cycle to form seedlings, which then we can take out to degraded areas and start those forests growing again.
Tem que fazer acompanhamento, como é que está sendo a germinação, até chegar ao ponto de eu tirar ela do berçário.
Com todo cuidado, e levar até a casa de sombra e plantar cada uma delas com carinho e amor, porque senão não dá certo.
Fazer ela crescer, ficar ela bonita, para ir para o reflorescimento.
Nothing can be done in the environment without the support of your local community. The people that work here all are from the local community.
Eu conheci Mariana, ela tinha esse estabelecimento. E nosso dia aqui é um ensinando o outro.
A gente brinca, o que eu passo aqui a gente vem ver.
Isso aqui antigamente era pasto. Então, para mim, isso aqui é um orgulho.
Olhar para isso aqui hoje em dia é falar assim, hoje tem vida. Minha vida ainda está começando. E eu falo, eu quero me aposentar com isso aqui. Eu vou olhar lá na frente e falar assim, olha, aquela área ali passou pelas minhas mãos, as mudinhas, e olha o tamanho, hoje está maior do que eu. Chego na mata, dou aquela respirada funda e falo, estou em casa.
Forests are a place of wonder and beauty. They provide us with fresh water, clean air, food, medicine, and products we depend on every day, and are home to millions of people and species. Sadly, the world's forests are disappearing rapidly due to things such as unsustainable agricultural expansion, illegal logging and mining, unsustainable forest management, climate change, and many other factors. But companies like Silvamo are taking a stand with WWF to protect and restore forests in a key region where it operates, Brazil's Atlantic forest. The Atlantic forest is a richly biodiverse ecosystem that spans Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay. Unfortunately, this magnificent biome is highly endangered due to deforestation and forest degradation. Today,
Hello,
roughly
hello.
12% of the original forest remains in Brazil. WWF and Silvamo.
Hi everyone, welcome to our Restoration Day. Very nice to see you here, to have you here with us. We have been here since 9 a.m. with many sessions dedicated to the multiple angles of restoration. My name is Bárbara. I work with WWF Brazil. There I lead the nature-based solutions and carbon markets agenda and work very closely with restoration in the restoration team. So Taru and I have been leading here this day today. I'm very excited to present our session for Financing Restoration at Scale, Innovative Pathways. And we have a very exciting and amazing group of panelists here with us. And to present all of them, first and foremost, I would like to invite Damian Fleming. He is our Senior Director of Forests at WWF International. He's going to be moderating the session today. So thank you again, and hope we have a great session. Thank you.
Obrigado, Bárbara. Eu falo português, portunhol, português, mas eu vou falar em inglês agora, mas é muito feliz de estar aqui do Brasil outra vez, no meio do Amazonas, por esse assunto tão importante. Now in English. So, yesterday I was in a similar event that we had. Yesterday was our Forest Day, really with a big focus on deforestation and deforestation-free supply chains, which remains still the most effective and cost-efficient method of nature-based solution, and still should be like where our substantive focus is. But as we know, we are still losing forests at a pretty big rate, despite all of the commitments, around about 8 million hectares a year. And as the Global Tipping Points report that was released last month tells us we're also heading very fast towards a number of tipping points, and some of those already have been breached. The Amazon rainforest is one of those tipping points. So we need to halt deforestation, but we also need to reverse deforestation, and that means we need restoration, which is the topic of today. And so we're halfway through the UN decade on restoration. I think we've all seen already today and across COP some really great movement and action, but we still have an ambition gap, both in terms of implementation and in terms of finance. Restoration is also a really exciting space where synergies come together in terms of climate adaptation, in terms of climate mitigation, but it's also not just about climate. It's also about biodiversity. It's about the social benefits of restoration, bioeconomy, and Brazil has been, I think, a real powerhouse on bioeconomy. But one of those real barriers to scaling is finance, and that's what we're really diving into today. How can we really scale finance for restoration? What are the barriers? How do we bring in more private finance, which I think is still one of the main barriers? So we have a great set of panelists. We're going to have some introductory remarks from João first, and we're going to dive into many of those different opportunities and challenges about how we get private finance more and more blended finance into restoration, including great opportunities such as the TFFF, how we can also bring together bottom-up approaches, making sure that restoration is also equitable, and we bring in that benefit sharing. Also, how can we explore the opportunities around data and AI? But I won't say any more because I think the best thing to do is to hand over to João Veras, who is the Forest and Climate Advisor for LAC at UNEP, and João's going to give us some scene setting and opening remarks before we then get into the presentations proper. So João, over to you.
Thank you, Damien. So good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, thank you for WWF colleagues for the invitation and for the organization of the Restoration Day. I think before I start jumping into the actual remarks, I will reinforce what many panelists have done in these many panels and discussions that we have been. There is acknowledge where we are at the moment, the heart of the Amazon, and to acknowledge the amount that has been achieved in this biome in the last years. So now we have reached the lowest deforestation rates in decades, and this is also reflected in many efforts of restoration by the Brazilian government with the deforestation arch, for example. And then we got restoration that, as Damien has mentioned, has been increasing in terms of a nature-based solution and being understood much beyond just planting trees. It's a synergic action across all the Rio conventions, and if done properly, can boost local communities and can boost the way that projects are implemented in the ground. So we have this increasing popularity of restoration that is reflected, for example, in the policy coordination that Brazil is putting on Planaveg or the Arch of Restoration, but it's also reflected internationally. So if we take, for example, the efforts that have been taken by the UN Decade on ecosystem restoration, by 2025 we'll be able to demonstrate key impact across Africa, China, and Latin America with projects that showcase that restoration can be scaled and can generate green jobs on the ground. So from the Great Green Wall in Asia to the Dry Corridor in Latin America, we're proving that restoration works if done with integrity, and that can have bold targets in the outcome of 2030. But let's jump into finance. That is the main topic of this session. So this year, UNEP has launched the State of Forest for Finance, the State of Finance for Forests, that showcases the amount of investment that we need if you want to reach the Rio 2030 conventions. The fact is that right now we need $300 billion per year if you want to achieve the targets. But the investment that we got to the moment is only $84 billion per year. And of this total of $300 billion that we need, out of these $96 billion need to go to restoration. If we zoom into the Latin America countries, we will need $767 billion per year in annual investment in forest if you want to achieve these targets. And for restoration, it's going to be almost half of this investment. So it's big numbers, yes. And how can we achieve this finance? How we can make things differently to achieve, to fulfill, to bridge the gap? So we need blended finance mechanisms to the risk early capital investment. We need the private sector, impact investing, to jump into the value chains. And of course, grassroots organizations that will be able to connect the global funds to the territories. And when we speak about that, can seem too far away, can seem like a reality that, okay, we've been talking about that for so long right now, and it seems that nothing has actually been done on the ground. But when we take a closer look, actually things are shifting, and it's shifting for good. So the Brazilian government, alongside UNEP and some FCLP colleagues, have done this roadmap on unlocking forest finance this year, and have mapped some 6 of the most prominent solutions that can help us to scale forest finance, including for restoration, in the road to achieve the 2030 Rio objectives. So from TFFF to forest bioeconomy, subsidies reform, the management of sovereign debt, we have some instruments that are new, such as the TFFF. They are bringing a much-needed reform to the architecture of global forest finance, but also some other instruments that we know as old, but that the innovation relies on using them differently. All these mechanisms together can reach a potential of mobilizing almost $50 billion per year, and be a much needed help for us to achieve the Rio Conventions and to boost restoration with integrity and with scale. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Wow, that was really a really great scene setter, and I agree with you. I've been to a few COPs, and I think there's always that feeling that there's a lot of talk and not enough action. This COP feels different. There's still some way to go yet, but it does really feel like things are shifting. There's a real focus. I know it's been the objectives of the Brazilian presidency on action and implementation, and certainly what I've seen, I've only been here 2 days, in the events I've been at, is real focus on action and implementation. So hopefully we'll bring more of that today with some real examples of how we can build, which we can build on. And so to do that, I'm going to invite a really fantastic high-level panel to come and join us. So I'm going to call you out one by one, and if you can take a seat, we can all be together, and then we'll have some great questions to dive into this. So first, Paula Ridolfi, who is the Climate Change Advisor at the World Bank Group. Thank you for joining us. We have Viviane Behar, who is the, yes, please come. Yeah, do you want to come? Great. Who is the Executive Advisor of Business Development and Partnerships at Capital for Climate. Thank you. We have Andre Aquino, who is the Chief Economic Advisor at the Special Advisory Office at the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, Brazil. Thank you, Andre. We have Rubens Benini. Hi, Rubens, who is from TNC and is leading the Transnational Atlantic Forest Pact, which is part of one of the UN World Restoration flagships. It's great to have you here. Thank you very much. We have Taruim Quadros, who is one of the co-hosts for the whole day, but is the restoration lead at WWF Brazil. Taru, oh, there you are. Wonderful. Last but not least, we have Patricia Feliciano, who is the Managing Director for Sustainability Latin America at Accenture, and also is representing the Restore Partnership, which we'll hear a little bit more about today. Wonderful. Now I need to find my, my page for the first question. Always the problem with too many papers. So, yes, first question to Paula at the World Bank Group. So the question is, how can multilateral institutions accelerate the integration of nature-based solutions into mainstream climate, biodiversity, and development finance? And what are really about the enabling conditions? What are the enabling conditions that we really need? We talk about these a lot to really unlock that investment at scale and really allow also the implementation to happen at large scale as well. So over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. I work at the World Bank Group, which is one of the MDBs that are active in the space, and happy restoration, COP30 Restoration Day to all of you today. So yes, very happy to be here. As you know, last week, the multilateral development banks announced a common taxonomy on nature. And this is the first step for all of us to agree about what we are talking about. So that is literally the foundation. Taxonomy at the country level, we help Colombia, we help Peru, we help several countries in this region and globally, understanding what their nature taxonomy is and what we mean by land restoration and forest restoration. And we apply this taxonomy now in a common and shared way with all the MDBs as of last week. So this is one of the outcomes from this COP that I hope everyone will bring home, and it's a major achievement. Second, it's important to understand that when we talk about land restoration, we need to talk about demarcations, but also institutional setups. So understanding the policies that are needed in each country to create sort of the boundaries of restoration and what we mean with restoring forest. And when we reward forest conservation, for example, through the new TFFF, on which I would like to congratulate my Brazilian colleagues and especially my World Bank and Brazilian colleague, André. The TFFF is really about defining what we mean by forest and when is that we reward countries with restoration efforts. Finally, it's about what the Baku to Belém roadmap is teaching us. So the Baku to Belém roadmap that has been endorsed a few days ago here at COP30 includes some new innovative mechanisms that have been proven successful elsewhere that we can apply to forest nature conservation and restoration. And these include private sector mobilization through nature bonds, debt for nature swaps, as well as mobilizing and catalyzing private sector in efforts to protect the natural wealth endowment, and in particular forest for countries. So I see these different levels, and I also see a micro level for those of you who work in efforts at the project level to actually produce projects that are bankable so that we as MDBs can come in. And I would like to make the example of Natura, a Brazilian enterprise that receives funding from the IFC, our private sector branch, for its successful conservation effort, as well as jobs creation in the community and rewards for the forest stewards who allow us to actually continue to protect and preserve the forest. Thank you.
Right, well, thank you, Paola. Some really great responses there. And I think, again, in previous COPs, we heard a lot about the need for the MDBs to really align with the climate and nature goals, and it's great to see that really now happening. And these taxonomies, as you say, I think are really, really critical and important framework for us to do that. And also, congratulations to the World Bank Group for your involvement in the TFFF, which I think we all know is one of the most exciting, I think, developments at this COP. And of course, André, who's been one of the chief architects of things. So I'm sure we'll be coming to that when we come to André. So over to Viviane now to tell us a little bit now from an impact investor's perspective. Again, nature-based solutions, how can we better structure these to meet the institutional expectations in terms of risk-adjusted returns? What are the kind of market signals or financial instruments that are most needed, again, to really unlock that private finance, which is still, we're seeing lots of expansion of restoration. A lot of it's still public finance. So how do we get that larger flows of finance into restoration and NBS more broadly?
Thank you, Damien. Thank you for all the organizers here of the panel. It's great to be with my panelists here today. Delighted to be here. So I'm Viviane Behar, Head of Business Development for Capital for Climate. Capital for Climate is an investment platform that is focused on nature-based solutions, and we act globally, but our greatest focus is in Brazil. And what we do is we bring international and also local investors to invest in nature-based solutions. We have a tremendous focus in Brazil. We've been mapping the opportunities for the last 3 years in Brazil, so we believe we have the most extensive pipeline to date. And Brazil has all the comparative advantages, as our friend mentioned a little bit before, so that we can be the hub for NBS for the world. So we have the Amazon, we have continental size in land, we have a very sophisticated agribusiness to make this transition. We also have, going into finance, a very sophisticated capital markets. So we will talk a little bit more about that. And we have since seen a tremendous momentum from the Brazilian government. And today we have here André Aquino as the rep here. And it's amazing what has been done in such a short period of time from different angles, different structures within the Brazilian government on a transversal effort, I would say, across ministries. And I'm sure André is going to talk in detail about that. But this really creates an enabling environment for the institutional investor. In addition to this, we've seen a lot of deal flow in the last, I would say, 24 months, and an impressive fund formation also within that time period. So if we look across institutional investors, we see, for example, I'm just going to give a few examples, AXA putting together a 1 billion climate fund. Not all of it is nature-based solution, not all of it is Brazil, but also TIG with a $500 million fund that now is scaling up to $1 billion. We see Regia, the Brazilian large asset manager, which is a combination of Banco do Brasil and JGP, with almost $300 million going to way more than that. Nuveen, $500 million. Mirova, $500 million going to $1 billion. CAM, Climate Asset Management, close to $1 billion. Rubicon, the carbon platform, going from $300 million to $1 billion. Gen Zero with Temasek, $500 million. So we've seen a lot of momentum recently, and I would say that this is very important because what we want at the end of the day is that nature-based solutions becomes a mainstream asset class rather than just a one-off occasional projects. But with that in mind, to answer Damien a little bit more, what you asked is that obviously institutional investors, there's the mindset. A deal has to be investable, has to be scalable, has to be predictable, and has to have a risk-adjusted return. And what we have seen, and this is very important to reinforce, is that nature-based solutions allows for commercial returns while having a lot of positive impact. So what we have seen is that, for example, the restoration of degraded land, you have land appreciation, you have agri-commodities, and that provides something in the neighborhood of 10 to 15% IRR. You have the restoration of native forests, where you have carbon, you have timber, you have biodiversity credits even, and that may provide even a wider range of like high single digits to high double digits, like from 8 to the high teens. Regen ag, you have productivity improvements, you have timber, you have commodities, and you have soil carbon, and all of these ensure that you have a return in the neighborhood of single digits to mid double digits, so like from a 6 to a 15% return. And agroforestry, somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 17% return. So with that, it's become a very attractive landscape for institutional investors, as long as the deals are well structured, they're scalable, predictable, they have good revenue sources, like the ones I mentioned just now, and that you have risk mitigation across the board. And the risk mitigation comes in various forms, and the government of Brazil is helping us a lot in that regard. So risk mitigation can come in the form of guarantees. It can come into the form of first loss capital. So we have examples like the Reverti program, which is a program launched by Syngenta and Itaú. And it's probably the most successful and largest program to date in Brazil for Region Ag, of about, I think, 3 billion or over 3 billion reais already, where Syngenta has provided the first loss and Itaú leverages this across to the small farmers. So that's a good example of that. Another example is some sort of political risk insurance or insurance. We've seen, for example, insurance companies like Aon providing or underwriting risk of guaranteeing the delivery of carbon credits for off-takers. And so this allows for risk mitigation from the investor point of view. And so this is very helpful. One of the things that we have been noticing is that, and this is a call to action to corporates, we believe that corporates have to step up in different forms, in addition to the MDBs, of course. But corporates, we see that once corporates are involved in any shape or form, there is a bigger, I would say, capacity of investors to be more comfortable with a project. It can be in the form of stakeholders in an OPCO, like we have biomas with a big, we have banks at the OPCO like Itaú, Rabobank, Santander, but we also have corporates like Suzano and Vale and Marfrig. So that is one way because this ensures robustness, this gives governance, and so it is a risk mitigating aspect, element of the deal. Then you have offtake agreements. So corporates need to actually procure commodity-based products from these projects so that they can ensure a guaranteed revenue stream. And this is absolutely key, not just for the commodities, but for carbon credits as well. We've seen Vale play a big role in that. And lastly, I would say the first loss, like I mentioned, from a corporate standpoint, which is possible as well. And one of the things that I would also mention is standardization. To the extent that we can have standardized offtake agreements that are bankable and financeable, that goes a long ways to unlock investments. We have a very good example of the Profloresta Mais, which was done by Petrobras and BNDES. So Petrobras and BNDES, and with the help of lawyers and ICS and other members, created, what they did was they brought the offtake contract that BNDES was comfortable for the energy sector in financing that, they adapted it to carbon. So BNDES is comfortable with that, approving that offtake contract now for carbon. And Petrobras is going to do RFPs because they want to restore, they have a commitment, they have to restore a lot of thousands of hectares, and they said that they need to offset with carbon credits up to 15 million tons of carbon credits. That's huge. That's just under the Symbiosis Coalition, which has stated it will go with 20 million carbon. So once a developer wins the RFP with Petrobras, they can go immediately with that contract to the BNDES and obtain long-term financing with patient capital. So this is another demonstration that we're going in the right direction. So I think there are several signs, good signals from the market that we are getting there. And I think that just to wrap this, at Capital for Climate, we tried to map this investment intent. And we did a survey with our partner Deloitte. And we launched it here at COP. We had a goal of $5 billion of investment intent for nature-based solutions in Brazil. We achieved not only under the 5 billion, but we got to 10 billion, just over 10 billion of intent to invest in the next 3 years. So capital is interested in Brazil. That's the good news. Thank you.
Wow, well, thank you. I mean, That's wonderful. And you know, I think I started by saying we are moving now from words and theoretical to really stuff happening on the ground, which I think is so exciting. We're turning these deals from millions to billions, which is really what we need. And thank you for bringing some really concrete examples. You know, we really grounded that in things that really are happening and really give us a good understanding of how this deal flow really works in practice. And I'm sure we'll dive a bit more into that. One of the other things I think you highlighted is Brazil's leadership on this, and I think that's a nice segue to Andre Aquino. If we have time, I'd love to understand how ready other regions and countries are. But first, let's really explore a little bit the Brazilian case. What's the Brazilian government doing, you know, in terms of some of these enabling conditions around policy incentives, around blended finance tools to mobilize? What's the success story in mobilizing this investment in nature-based solutions? Of course, all very curious about the TFFF and how this fits and how that finance can enable that. So yeah, over to you, Andre.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Really glad to be here among our friends. I'll disappoint you because I will not talk a lot about the TFFF. I will actually thank, particularly here, WWF, and I see Mauricio there, the effort we made and that paid off last week, this week, has been a true team effort. I mean, I must say that in my career, I've never seen this mutirão, really, of NGOs, private sector, COP champion, tropical forest countries, what we call potential investor countries, now investor countries, Norway, Germany, Indonesia, coming together. It has been a remarkable effort of technical and political engagement. And of course, all of these, let's say, powered by the fact that we are hosting the COP and we made forest and nature a central piece of this COP. Now, the TFFF and restoration. Restored forests in tropical areas will count as forest, so they are paid. And the country may decide how to use their money, and they may use the money to de-risk, reduce the cost of restoration. For that, come at 3:30 now, somewhere here in the action agenda, because that's what we're going to be discussing. How we have started thinking about the use of the TFFF money. In Brazil, this could be all the way up to $800 million a year. And the idea, and this is completely preliminary, is that this money will be used for incentives for keeping the forest standing and restoration. But, and this I need to be clear, the TFFF is the mechanism for conservation. And we will talk about restoration here, and this is very important. But please, guys, let's not forget, conservation is #1 priority. We can never bring it back once it's broken, and it costs a lot of money. And now, on restoration, we have, Brazil has very ambitious targets of restoration. And these targets are embedded in the highest level of planning documents, like the NDC. So we have the target of 12 million hectares that one of your previous colleagues now, Thiago Belotti, is the head of forest. Sorry, my voice is fading away. And 12 million hectares of forest restoration, 40 million hectares of pasture land restoration, and 10 million hectares of semi-arid, degraded land that we need to restore. I think Viviane made my life much easier because she raised the instruments that the government has been putting in place. Not of ruim. De-risking mechanisms, Fundo Clima, the climate fund we have, last year we allocated 25 billion reais. A big portion of that is for the forest credit line, which is the lowest interest rate for forests. And just now, BNDES announced new deals with Suzano, Ray Green, I just saw Ray Green folks outside there, Mombach. So this ecosystem of private companies is being supported by the government in a number of ways. Financial mechanisms, subsidized credit. Another one, 2 weeks ago, the Minister of Environment, the Brazilian Forest Service, we issued for the first time the CRAS. This is a bit like a biodiversity offset. So it's an environmental asset that private landholders can issue and sell when they have surplus native vegetation, including vegetation under restoration, which is something that people talk little about. So if your land is under restoration, that also gives you the right to issue cota de reserva ambiental. One more. I think Rubens will talk about this, but the government has been very supportive of all these networks. It's a very unique thing in Brazil, these biome networks, right? That bring actors together. So, finance, political support, one more. A lot of restoration to be made financially feasible will need some sort of payment for ecosystem service. And carbon credits for now is the most well developed. So we have also been moving on that. We have a law on our ETS that will allow for forest offsets, and we are moving on 6.4. There is a thorny issue, I will not hide it, about ITMOS, because the position of the Brazilian government is now that we will not allow ITMOS for now. This is something that is going to lead to a lot of conflicts and discussions with the private sector still, but the position now is that because we have a very ambitious NDC, we need to reduce our emissions by 70%. And honestly, there's only the land use sector for us to do that. I mean, industry, transport, that's not a big thing in Brazil. Just to conclude, and a bit being provocative, since we are in the Panda Pavilion, we need to be very careful about what we call restoration, right? There will be restoration, particularly of pasture land, that is basically agriculture or livestock, right? But we need ecological restoration with biodiversity and so on. That is the one that is the most difficult because it's slow growth, it's complicated, it's way more expensive, and so we need to keep looking for ways to raise additional sources of streams of financing, right, to make them viable. Thanks.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Andrea. That was really fantastic. First, for reminding us that standing forest is our #1 priority, and it's great that TFFF is really filling that gap, and also the importance of ecological restoration, and not just thinking about climate and carbon. Actually, it's the social and particularly the biodiversity aspects we need to look at. It's very warm, very warm in here. I was hosting an event yesterday, which was really talking about the importance of political commitments and NDCs, and really a call to action to governments to really bring their ambition into NDCs and formalize that. And again, congratulations to Brazil for a very ambitious NDC, particularly around restoration. So you're ticking that box very, very well. And and I think, really talking about the role that, and you started off by talking about the policy signals. And so the role that Brazil is playing in terms of the policy signals, but also in terms of concessional finance. And then finally, on payment for ecological services, which I think is now a kind of good segue to Rubens, because we want to kind of explore with you a little bit about how we bring the political signals, the enabling conditions, but how we make sure that this really has impact on the ground, and really thinking about what are the innovative territorial and grassroots finance mechanisms through the Trinational Atlantic Forest Pact that you are working on. How does that really bring the bottom-up solutions so that the capital that we raise really does reach those that most in need on the ground to make that change happen? So over to you, Rubens.
Thank you so much, Damian. Thank you, colleagues, for being here. I'm glad to be here today. To answer these questions, Damian, I have to explore two different subjects. First, I'd like to talk the flagship initiative under the UN decade, on ecosystem restoration. And second, we will explore a little bit more about the facilitating agents for restoration, what we call AFR, sorry, agents for facilitate the restoration. Let's start with the big picture. The Atlantic Forest is, as you know, is one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet, but is also one of the most threatened. Here in Brazil, we lost more than 80% of this important biome. And to change that, to change this situation, the current situation, the three national restoration network and Atlantic Forest Restoration Pact joined and together were recognized by ONU for the decades as the flagship. It means that we are one of the 10 initiatives in the world that can change and scale up restoration very quickly. Why is it that important? Because it puts our work on the global stage and connect us to a decade-long movement to restore ecosystems worldwide. Now this flagship is not just a title. Now it's a commitment. So we are looking for how to really scale forest restoration. Through the pact, the Atlantic Forest Restoration Pact, we have over, nowadays, currently, 360 members. Which includes NGOs, companies, universities, governments, civil society, etc. Together, we aim to restore 15 million hectares by 2050. But now we already have restored more than 140,000 hectares by now, which is impressive, but we need to scale up. And I think the Atlantic Forest Restoration agents for facilitate restoration comes in this direction. Our next milestone is very ambitious. We intend to restore 1 million hectares by 2030. That's a huge leap, and that's where AFR comes in to solve. So what is the AFR? Now answer your question. Think in AFR like a hub. So a bridge that connects three essential players: those who implement the restoration on the ground, the investors who found it, and the governments that see the policies. And so we're trying to connect all these in this AFR, Agents for Restoration Facility. The mission of the AFR is simple but very powerful. Turn commitments and resources in real restoration on the ground, in restored hectares, How does it work in practice? AFR operates on several fronts. First, it identifies and structures high-quality projects with strong social and environmental impact. Then, it combines different financial tools to make restoration viable and attractive. It also manages technical and financial flows with continuous monitoring and shared governance. So we are building at this time a very strong governance, including government, investors, and civil society in this governance, right? And every project is georeferenced and displayed on a public platform. So transparency is very important for us, including to engaging more investors and giving them the information about where are our projects, how the projects are going under the restoration projects. So FRR works in two main ways. One, it creates mechanisms that can be non-reimbursable and like direct donations, grants, or matching funding, So, or even resources reimbursable, such as guarantees and territorial funds. So we are looking for this different kind of blended funding. And the other direction, the direction two, it provides technical assistance and financial management support to organizations in the pact. So along with ongoing training and governance. So we need to capacity the members of PACT to do to get not only to access the money, access the funding, but how can report though to the investor. So this is a very important issue as well. And the cooperation is at the heart of this model. No? AFR builds several ways to collaboration. So we have to work with governments because we are trying to solve many problems of the different sectors. For example, governments, public sectors always say, oh, we need to centralize more the funding and operate more in scale because the public costs today spread a lot of money and it's very difficult to manage this. So Atlantic Forest Restoration NGOs could solve this to the government and give transparency as well. For the investors, we are trying to build in this kind of matching funding, with catalytic resources, the risks funding, trying to giving more power to the members of PACT. Because our theory of change is, if we give, I said before, we have 360 members, and more or less 140 members are members that are implementing restoration on the ground. So we have the money, we have the knowledge how to restore, but now we have to empower these guys, these 140 guys, giving more money, giving more access, because these guys have the landowners. These guys can open the doors and bring in more landowners interested in restore part of the degraded areas. It means more restored areas, more areas under restoration process. No one has this. Just PACT, just Atlantic Forest Restoration Pact and the three national Atlantic Forest Restoration Pact. So we are very proud to launch this here in COP, and we really believe that is the way to put money, in the clouds on the ground, and we have this power in the pact.
Well, Rubens, congratulations. Maybe a round of applause for that initiative. I mean, Andre talked a little bit about the importance of an ecosystem. You're bringing that to life. I mean, it sounds obvious we need to work with partners, but I mean, 360 members is a lot of people, right? It can't be easy to work with that many, and particularly because restoration is technically complex, financial deal making is technically complex. And obviously the tools and the technical assistance you're providing is really working, and providing that pipeline that can match the investor signals that we're getting from Viviani. So that's really wonderful. So we've heard about private finance, we've heard about the policy signals, we've heard about what's happening on the ground. Now I'm going to hand over to Taru. I know we're very hot here. She's been all day, so I don't know how you're doing. But so you're going to talk to us a little bit about philanthropic capital and the role of that in terms of contribution to catalytic, high-integrity, nature-based solutions. But also, again, Andre talked about the importance of ecological restoration. So we need to make sure that we have mechanisms and implementation that is also really providing benefits for people and nature. So it'd be good to hear a little bit about what WWF, how you're advancing in terms of the implementation and finance mechanisms to accelerate that kind of restoration. And maybe you've also got something to launch, I hear, anyway. So good that we're all kind of launching and sharing here. So Taru, over to you.
Yeah, it's working. Yes, thanks, Damien. Actually, how we are going to do this and work with philanthropic funds, right? And first of all, thank you for all the panelists here. For us, it's an honor to have you in our Panda House and to have this kind of discussions, especially here in Brazil. And as you guys saw, André mentioned a lot of innovative things that Brazilian government is doing, and all these institutions here also mentioned a lot of other mechanisms that complement the public view. But also, because this is only like the tipping point of everything that is happening, we have lots of discussions, and since the start of the day, we have been talking about a high-level global perspective and governmental perspective on how to implement the ambitions related to nature-based solutions. We talk about commitments into the ground level, how do we connect the social protagonism and the territorial strengthening that is needed to achieve these huge ambitions that we have globally. And we also talk about public policies and these multi-level approaches that we need. But in the end of the day, the hot topic that is connecting everything right now is finance, is what we are discussing here. And it is the top hot topic of COP, and it is what we need for the urgent need to achieve our global ambitions. And we have like 5 urgent years to accelerate implementation of restoration. And we already have, yes, experiences and some models and ways to do it, but we need to understand how do we can then replicate it, how do we can expand it, how do we can connect everything in a coordinated way, in a coordinated flow to achieve these ambitions. So that's precisely where I think we, as WWF, but the philanthropic capital perspective and also the NGO, civil society perspective has an important role. We can be the catalysts of everything. And I see that we can bring the bridge between everyone that is here, everyone that is discussing, and especially the implementation on the ground. The networks that are working in a coordinated manner on the restoration supply chain, and how do we bring this coordination of the thing. So I strongly believe that this is a role that we are already playing, and I will mention in a bit some announcements that will give you some details on how we are doing this. So I also wanted to highlight that it has been a timeline of work towards this financial approach on restoration, especially with the case of the Trinational Atlantic Forest flagship that Rubens just mentioned, but also on WWF. So we have been since COP15 engaging with initial financial discussions with the UN Decade support. We started an approach on what are the different models that we can implement restoration at the scale here in Brazil, using the flagship as an example. And we understood that the current scenario, agroforestry do play an important role on it. But taking André's provocation here, this is not the only model to implement restoration. And is like a portfolio of models, a portfolio of arrangements that we need to implement the landscape level. So how do we do this? This is exactly where I think Union for Restoration, institutions as WWF can help to make this happen. So how do we coordinate these different models, these different portfolios, but at the same time, how do we talk to you guys, investors, to the public sector as well, to the Brazilian ministry, to any other governmental, and we discuss about criteria, about safeguards, about what kind of structural mechanism needs to happen to be connected to the on-the-ground level, but also what the landscapes have to offer. And Rubens just mentioned an amazing example that we have that is exactly why we are a reference at the global level and that we are working closely with the UN Decade on this. But I also wanted to highlight a suite of high-integrity restoration finance that WWF is supporting, a lot of them with the Union for Restoration support here in Brazil, and especially looking to the ambition that André just mentioned. We have a 12 million hectares ambition, but it's not a governmental ambition. It's a Brazilian society ambition. So everyone has a role to play in it. And exactly to accelerate this, we are looking to the financial mechanism to make it happen. So looking for of course, the return of investment, but also the philanthropic capital, the capital that is small, looking to the return of our investment and the billions of investors that we have, but it could be like a changing point for a strategic intervention on it. So we have been working with the Brazilian Ministry of Environment and Climate Change with a project called GF8, which is Restaura Biomas. We are starting officially right now. Rubens from TNC is also part of this, WRI Brazil, Conservation International. And our goal is exactly to accelerate implementation of Plana VEG. We are talking about 600,000 hectares implemented in the upcoming 5 years, but also 1.2 million hectares. And WWF Brazil has a role on leading the financial mechanisms behind it. Some of the examples Andrea already mentioned, and some of these investors and these colleagues here already mentioned. So be sure I'll be talking to you guys a lot in the upcoming years to make it happen. The other one is a catalyst mechanism for a large-scale impact in the Atlantic Forest, connected with the Atlantic Forest facility that Rubens just mentioned. So looking to Brazil examples, but how to replicate to Argentina and Paraguay. And we have a coordinated model to announce. We already map and have structured 1.6 million hectares of ambition to deliver restoration in this tri-national approach from the Atlantic Forest. We mapped that this could have a financial potential of $3.2 billion related to the restoration on climate and biodiversity funds. And it could unlock 126,000 jobs, green jobs. It would bring more than between 150 and $60 million of revenue to local communities that live within these boundaries of the Atlantic Forest. So this is precisely the role that WWF can play and that the civil society, the NGOs can play. How do we translate the information from the ground to a structured financial approach, to influence, to bring criteria, but also to showcase how we can implement things in an arrangement that is needed at this scale. So with no further delays, just to say that these are examples that we are replicating with our network as well. So this Catalyst example is something that we will be bringing to Africa 100, trying to strengthening the collaborations with African countries and coalitions as well. And we have lots of support from our WWF network. So the UK office, the US office, Denmark, Netherlands, and much more support of other countries that we have. And this only reinforces that the multilateral approach is essential for everything that we are discussing here. And this table reflects this. So I think that's the message. Let's accelerate things together in this multi-collaboration approach.
Thank you very much. It's let's accelerate, but we are accelerating, I think, which is what is exciting. And often we talk about restoration in 1 hectare, 2 hectares, which it's all important, right? But really, this is the scale we need to be talking in millions of hectares, as you're doing, which is incredibly exciting, and also bringing the importance also of the aspect around job creation and economic development, which is so critical. Right, well, I know we're all wilting here slightly, but we're getting there. Thank you for sticking with us as well and fanning yourselves. So Patricia, last but not least, over to you. Yeah, I mentioned at the beginning, this is also obviously a revolution in terms of data and AI and technology. So how can we utilize and integrate data, technology, human insight, not just about the computers, but also the human elements of it, to really support informed financing decisions for ecological restoration? And how can technology really help us and help investors identify the right projects?
Wow, thank you.
Big ask, huh?
Big ask, yes. And it's not easy to be the last after this such good content sharing here. But first, thank you for the invitation. Thank you, WWF, to be here in such an important topic. So I'm honored to be here sharing the vision that brings together technology, data, and purpose to support ecological restoration. So, and to promote the economic inclusion of the people and communities who make restoration possible. So it's good that I think I may complement many of you on another perspective. And I like it, Viviane, your point on how important it is to have structured projects in order for us really to have information to do the investments needed. So today I'm here representing Accenture, but also Restor. So a strategic partner work closely to intend of have really a meaningful and scalable implementation. So we will try also not to give some insight, but also to share with you some really things that we are already implementing and doing with Restor. So we believe that restoration ecosystems go far beyond planting trees. It's about regenerating landscapes, empowering communities, and unlocking a new restoration economy. One that values those who can care for the land and generate income, dignity, and opportunity. So But to scale this transformation, we need more than capital. We need reliable, integrated, and actionable data that really comes with technology. So in this context, Accenture has joined forces with restaurants to accelerate and amplify what they already do best, restoration data. So together, we are expanding restaurants' capability to help the entire ecosystems make more informed decisions. The platforms combines ecological and socioeconomic data with AI to support investment decisions with precision and confidence. So it's a platform that turns data into actionable insights with automated dashboards, smart benchmarks, and predictable analytics that reveal where, how, and with whom to invest for the greatest impact. So this technology is already being used to plan, monitor, and scale restoration projects across various Brazilian biomes and around the world. It enables investors to identify initiatives aligned with their priorities, whether in job creation, gender or youth inclusion, or social and environmental benefits. More than that, the solution connects all parts of the restoration value chain, so governments, investors, implementers, and local communities, just you said, a multilateral, I'd say, coalition in order to make this happen. Each stakeholder gains access to data that strengthens their role, promotes transparency, and enhances their ability to drive impact. We are talking about a virtual cycle. More data and integration leads to better analysis, smart decisions, increased funding, and more restoration and positive impact on the ground. And this is where we see a major opportunity. We've just launched Accenture Net Zero Destination Report 2025 last week, which shows that while the use of data, it makes a lot of sense and really support the decarbonization journey, only 30% of the major 22,000 companies in the world are using AI and data. So it's still very low. So there's a major opportunity for us to accelerate, really to bring intelligence and scale on climate action. So just as important as having capital is having a data and knowledge to make informed decisions about where to invest. So to understand the value case for impact and to monitor and measure results over time. In the end, it's not just about restoration ecosystems. It's about restoring connections, trust, and our future. So that's what we aim to do. Unite technology, data, and purpose to accelerate restoration, to scale with impact and with inclusion, and to support decision-making for consistent, high-impact projects. And really, what we really think is that by having data and technology, we can really build more consistent, robust projects in order to have more risk analysis, and so we can have better decision on how to invest and how to scale the reforestation challenge we have. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and that was great. Yeah, and I love the bringing the restoration of trust and inclusion. I think that's really fantastic. And I am a bit of an AI dinosaur, but I recognize the huge opportunity here we have at our fingertips, particularly when you have 360 members in one landscape. How technology and AI can really simplify that. So I need to check what time we're at now. I think we have a bit of time. We might want to finish a little bit early just so people don't get too hot. But are there any questions from the audience? Yes, please. Let me know if it's directed at anyone in particular or.
Okay, hello. Thank you so much for this interesting discussion. I'm Joyce Ferreira. I work here in Belém at Embrapa with restoration. I really liked it. André Aquino talk because he highlighted the role of conserving the standing forest together with restoration. But I couldn't hear much about this integration among agendas, for example, among the agenda of restoration, the agenda of conservation of standing forests. So if possible, I would like to hear from the other panelists their thoughts about that. Okay? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So anyone want to answer that one? I think that was...
But yeah, perhaps I can get started to give an overview of the day itself. So, one of the co-hosts of the Restoration Day here is the GPFLR, is the Global Partnership on Forest Landscape Restoration, and the other one is the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. And both of them set the scene that restoration should not happen without conservation. So the concept of landscape restoration and the principles of the UN Decade are already highlighting the importance of restoration as an integrative approach together with conservation. And I think, well, we need to discuss more clearly, but from what I know is already happening, it's how the lines of these finance mechanisms also stimulate this coordination between conservation and restoration. Sometimes it looks only for agroforestry, let's say, but we also have examples here in Brazil of restoring within protected areas, nas UCs do Brasil, por exemplo. So how do we coordinate this conservation approach with the restoration agenda at the level that we need? This is still a challenge, but on the conceptual level, I think there are already some common vision on it.
All right, anyone else want to respond, or? Yeah?
Good.
Very good. Yeah, another question? Okay. Just, I'll come to you in a moment.
Thank you. I would just like to add something that I mentioned the survey that we did from the investor side, their intent to invest in nature-based solutions, but we also conducted another survey from the developer side. We took the top 30 developers in Brazil and see what would be their capacity to absorb capital in the same time frame, so that we wouldn't just have the intent of investment without the actual pipeline. And what I wanted to mention is that while there is a demand of absorptive capacity of $6 billion, this translates into just under 3 million hectares. That is for restoration. But if we count conservation, we go to almost 10. So conservation will be the biggest ask for financing that we have.
Maybe I'll just use the opportunity. I think it's important that we look at restoration and conservation also as opportunities to create livelihoods opportunities. With the Amazon landscape project that we finance, we have the ASL. We create restoration projects and opportunities that actually create livelihoods. I visited on Sunday with Patricia a wonderful restoration project financed by ProBlue and the World Bank in Kurosa, up on the coast. And it's really incredible how we can restore mangroves, create livelihoods opportunities for oyster extractivists, and at the same time help to conserve the blue economy at the margins of the forest. So these agendas should be really going together. Thank you.
Yeah, just two quick things. I think we need to be talking about landscapes, right? So restorations, they happen in a place where there is a lot happening. There is agriculture, there is conservation, there is... So the restoration sites, they need to be seen as part of the larger landscape. And this is easy to say. It's very difficult to do in practice because at the landscape level, the governance mechanisms we have are not really, in Brazil, are not really conducive to this type of thinking, right? I keep saying, you don't have the mayor of the watershed or the mayor of the ecological corridor. You have the mayor of the city. That is not really an ecological concept, right? I find this very challenging, to be honest. And now, back to Viviane's point. This is why in Brazil we have been saying the bioeconomy, right? The larger bioeconomy. But I get a bit worried because I do believe that when it gets to forests, we are spending much less time than needed on sustainable use of forests. We've had this conversation, like forest concessions in Brazil. That's still a very difficult thing. I used to work for the Brazilian Forest Service. Struggling, the companies that work on forest, sustainable forest management, FSC certified, very difficult. And this is key. That's forest management there. Tourism, excellent ideas, but small scale. So anyway, I think that the role of the private sector in the conservation business is something we really need to continue exploring.
Yeah, and then maybe I see we have another question over there, but also just to add myself and to bring a bit of a link between the Restoration Day today and the deforestation, the Forest Day that we had yesterday, and really to reiterate the point that Andrea made is we need restoration, but actually the most important thing is to keep the forest standing, right? That's critical, and we need to be very conscious that while we're promoting restoration, we also need the finance sector, we need the private sector to be really doing everything they can to ensure that we halt the loss of forests. We launched a finance report last year looking at the finance gap in Brazil and in Indonesia. And well, first we found the finance gap was very big, but second that we found that the negative finance flows in Brazil and Indonesia far outweigh the positive finance flows. So there's a danger that we see, finance coming in for restoration, which is great, but we really need to see a commitment from the finance sector and from the private sector to really now phase out deforestation from their investments and from their supply chains. That's crucial. So, yeah. But I have another question. And finance, absolutely, yeah. Oh, and fires, yeah, of course, yeah.
Thank you so much. Can I ask 3 brief questions from 3 people, or? Okay, so, sorry. Sorry, can I get your name card?
Yes, I'll give.
Okay, so I have a question from Miss Vivian and Miss Paola. So, Miss Vivian, can you talk about your grasslands projects, if you have grasslands projects, and do you see any potential in the grasslands carbon market? And from Miss Paola, does the new taxonomy include the voices of the Global South, or is it made by, who were the authors, and how did you ensure that, it included the voices or the regional specificities of Global South? Yeah, thank you.
I didn't understand the question. So the first question is about grasslands and carbon markets.
What about it?
Grasslands are also included in the opportunities for carbon markets.
Yes, it is included. It's one of the nature-based solutions, so yes, definitely.
Thank you. So MDBs represent both global and regional entities, right? So, and each of us has shareholders. So anything that goes at that level of institutional coordination both represents the shareholders, the majority of which would be from the South in this case, because it's regional MDBs, the Global World Bank, and they're discussed. So it's more of a technical conversation. So it is, it has to be useful for the countries that we serve, right? And so the World Bank serves the Global South, and the Asian Development Bank would serve the Asia and Pacific Global South. The Inter-American Development Bank would serve the Latin America countries. So these are useful tools. They're not political. They're really technical, useful tools that reflect the experience serving these constituencies. So I would see it as really as a technical way to make it easier for us to work together. Thank you.
Great. Should we, maybe we call it time, or? Yeah, I mean, I think we do have 15 minutes left, but I think I can see everyone fanning, and we have, COP is a marathon, so people need to conserve their energy and drink some water and find somewhere a bit cooler. But look, listen, a huge, huge thank you to all of our panelists. Maybe just a very, very quick summary. I think it's been a really natural flow, from policy to finance, architecture, to what needs to happen in the landscapes, private, public sector investments, technology and AI, and how that can help us. A big message here is around the need to work in partnerships. It feels obvious, and it's something we always say, but I think particularly thanks to you, Ruben, for really, I think all of you have brought concrete examples about how these things are really happening. It's no longer theory and what needs to happen. This is what's happening. How can we learn from that? I mean, one of the questions I would love to have asked is, this has had a sabor brasileiro, this panel, and so it's very clear that Brazil is really advancing on this agenda now. It's becoming a real reference for the bioeconomy for restoration at scale. I'd love to understand how we can, export this model and what the learnings are, but that's, I guess, for another day or another session. Finally, to say that I started by talking about tipping points in a negative sense, and I think you mentioned the positive tipping points. It really feels like we're really reaching one here, at least in Brazil and places like the Atlantic Forest. There is this kind of perception that there isn't a pipeline of projects. There clearly is a pipeline of projects, right? We're hearing that now. But people are saying, well, there's no investable projects. We hear that regularly. And similarly, we say, well, there's not the finance available. It's too risky. Everyone's investing in clean tech and renewables because that's where the returns are. We're also hearing there's a huge demand from finance as well. So I think this is really happening now. It's fantastic. Thanks to our panelists. Thanks to all of you for great questions, for finding yourselves and staying with us in this very hot pavilion. And I know I don't know if you want to say a bit more about what's next in terms of, maybe go and get some water and fresh air, but there's more to come. So hopefully you can go and refresh yourselves for the next sessions.
I wish we could announce that we have free ice cream, but we don't. But we do have 2 more super interesting sessions on finance. So we will have an upcoming session at 4, right? That Barbara is leading on carbon high integrity finance, top topic here in COP and for all of us. And to finalize the day, we'll have something that was strongly mentioned in here, the corporate role behind the scaling finance to deliver implementation at bigger scale. And it will be moderated by our colleague here, Daniela, and will be a really interesting session with Nestlé, WBCSD, and some other colleagues, and also experience of pipelines and projects that are happening together with corporate. So stay tuned. We'll have a drinking session with refreshments after the final session, 7:50 around it. So also feel free to join us on this. And thank you so much again, guys. Let's take a picture. Yeah.